Wow. So yeah, this is another episode out, bi-weekly.
Ouch.
I believe that's I think that's that's a round of applause in itself. I think.
Yeah, to us.
Yeah. We'll get straight into it. Not too much any information, anything important to discuss. Sadly, there isn't a guest for this week. However, actually, I won't say, but maybe not next week, but the next podcast, we should hopefully get a guest in. So hopefully that will be coming around in the future. Other things, the format of this podcast, I was about to say show, but yeah, podcast. For now, it's very relaxed. It's not very strict in what it's doing. Obviously, we said before, it's sort of like first section is all just random thoughts or things appealing topics that we just talk about, and then the second part's like a review. We may discuss in this, in the first section, maybe a bit of alterations to that. But for now, it seems like this may be the general format for a while anyway, as it seems to incorporate everything that we need to talk about and things that we enjoy to talk about anyway. And sort of the other thing is, I guess, we'll go into this later, but yeah, sort of discussing maybe the idea of sort of the layout of this, maybe the things that are discussed, but also like the way that they are discussed in the sense of, for example, for a review, would it be more or less like an in-depth review, or is it more like a conversational topics, sort of, they're just sort of just thoughts on the movie or the media in general. But we'll get into that in a minute. The other thing is, this podcast is following, or this will follow on obviously from the last podcast, but more importantly, this one, I guess, more or less, will be focusing a little bit more on games in general. How story elements are going to be a focus with books and movies and stuff like that, but as the review for this week anyway is Total War Warhammer, which did come out in 2016, but I believe anyway now, especially with the second one, there's been a lot of changes and it's definitely become much better, and I feel like a review is worthy of it, well, more or less because me and Alex have played it recently. So, but I believe that is everything, unless there's anything you want to say, Alex, any important matters that you want to say off the bat?
No, not really.
Alright. Well, I believe we'll get over to the free flow section. Well, Alex, so last podcast we discussed the game Crusader Kings 2, the video game on Steam. We sort of finished up on it about the idea of replayability with games in general. I feel like we sort of touched on it. We didn't go too in depth into it, but I feel like nowadays anyway, I think it's a lot more relevant in certain games, because obviously it's more or less that idea, you want your money back in a sense, right? Sometimes, especially now with how much fucking games are, you obviously want to get the most out of it, especially with all these early access games, all these indie games. I will be honest, I feel like most indie games, the ones that I've played anyway, I wouldn't say I've played a lot, but I feel like they are less likely to be replayable or whatever, just because, well, there's probably not as much, I guess, content or otherwise in it. But actually, we'll go into sort of, I guess there's differences in a game in general being able to be replayed. But I feel like the main difference is, well, I guess there's two types of differences. There's the differences of the actual game itself, and there's the differences of what's in the game as well. So I feel like the differences of the game, so the game type, so there's, strategy games, story-driven games, or multiplayer games. When it becomes replayability, multiplayer is pretty easy, because obviously it's more or less a grind game, Think of Call of Duty, think of World of Warcraft, think of Destiny and stuff like that, They draw you back because of that sort of desire of you wanting to collect everything, or you want to continue to grind to be a highest level, or
get to the next level and stuff.
Yeah, and I sort of think, yeah, that's sort of the main appeal for multiplayer games. Then the story-driven games, which I feel like the most important part of that is the idea of like multiple decisions or branches or whatever they call it. So essentially the idea that there's more than one decision at each like intersection in the game, in a sense. When you're coming up to like a decision in the game, we have to decide between like two factions or something like that, right? That could obviously determine what side of the story you're playing, and then obviously you'll get to know one whole side of the game, but then you'll most likely miss out on some other parts of the game. There's like, obviously it depends also on what sort of game it is. We'll go into that in a second, but in terms of, there's like side quests. Sometimes some side quests you just skip in general, or there are main storyline sort of stuff, in the sense that you're like given decisions where you have to decide which faction you're joining, or which like people you're gonna have with you. That's another thing. Like depending what game it is, obviously companions and stuff like that. That really makes a difference. But that's that anyway for story-driven games. And I feel like strategy games are. I feel like they're sort of almost a mix of both of them. Strategy games, I feel like anyway, they bring you back because there's the decisions part of it, right? Where, for example, let's say Crusader Kings 2, you play as, you want to become Britannia. I'm jumping ahead of myself for Total War. What's it called? Britannia.
Or just Great Britain, because...
Or Great Britain in general. Yeah, when you want to, there's one part maybe in the game you're playing, as Wessex or whatever, and you want to become, the fucking king of England or whatever. That's like, that's one decision you want to do. But then, there's another decision where you're just like, fuck it, I want to somehow become the king of France and shit like that, right? There's sort of a decision aspect in there. And then, so I feel like that's the story part of strategy games, deciding on sort of where your goals like line up, because that's also another part.
Survival games are very similar to strategy games in that remark as well.
Yeah, but I feel like they're also very similar to multiplayer games in the sense of the grind.
Yeah.
Think of DayZ, right? DayZ, it's focused multiplayer game, but it's also survival in the sense, or depending what survival it is anyway, in a sense. But DayZ or Minecraft or stuff like that, right? They bring you back because there's decisions you're making, but also there's that grinding factor. So for example, in strategy games, you're grinding to like basically achieve that goal, essentially. Yeah. That's the sort of like the grinding part of it. The I guess the XP sort of part of it is where you want to just get to that final goal. And I think that's besides survival, and obviously there's a multitude of other games, all this other stuff, racing games or whatever stuff like that. But I think they're the big three anyway. That come to appeal to most people is the idea of replaying these three main games. I think anyway with these three games anyway. I was reading up a bit about this on some articles anyway, sort of seeing what the sort of I guess the thoughts are on it, like as of the current moment anyway. But it seems most of the time people are pretty happy with a lot of replay games, like replayability with games these days anyway. There's not much of a fuss with a lot of them. There are some, I will say, but most of the time there isn't, because, well, more or less because either they've been given, well, actually this goes into a different point, but mods and DLCs and free LCs and stuff like that. But I think with those three game types anyway, I feel like these three, they're not mechanics but they're three, I guess, aspects of games in general that also affect replayability. Is the idea of, is there more content in the game, right? So that goes into story-driven games. So the idea is that if you choose one faction over the other, you're losing all that other content. So it tries to draw you back in by saying, look, you only played this one faction. What about these other guys, right? And you're like, oh, there's more stuff to play. So it's the general idea of more content. So DLCs in story-driven games, multiplayer, season passes, strategy games, same thing with DLCs and stuff like that. The second part, anyway, or the second aspect, I think is like difficulty and challenging yourself. I find this, for me anyway, I'm not sort of a person like that. when I play a game, or depending obviously what it is, but most of the time I'll usually play, let's say like normal or hard or something like that, right? And I'll go on this in a second, but I wouldn't replay a game to play it on a harder difficulty, or just to play it on a harder difficulty. I'm not one of those, I feel like the ones who do challenging runs are those ones who are like, who want to be on those leaderboards, who want to be on the scoreboard and stuff like that.
I don't think I've ever really felt a need to play games on a difficulty over, like, maybe hard at the most. Like,
I haven't really found anything. Yeah, usually because I'm just really shit at it anyway, so I don't want to, like, screw my life any further. But,
that being
yeah, I feel like...
I don't normally play games with a difficulty slider these days anyway.
True. Well, it depends also what game it is, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that another aspect, I would say is the idea of challenging or challenges or difficulty in general that makes you sort of want to replay it again because you want to play on a harder difficulty, But that also, I guess, that challenge aspect runs into the idea of achievements. That's the whole reason why achievements are there as well, right? So I think that runs into it, is the achievements are there so you can replay the game to achieve those things, right?
Yeah.
That's another big appeal that games make, and obviously it draws a lot of people in, though I would be one of the people who doesn't really care for that stuff. Like, I don't mind, getting an achievement here and there, but I'm not actively seeking them out. I wouldn't be spending ages just trying to figure out how to do these achievements. I probably would have ages ago, but now I don't really care.
Just make achievements like this almost impossible thing to get nowadays. That's just like...
Oh, yeah. But it's for those like super hardcore people who like spend their entire day doing the hardest difficulty, doing all the hardest things, and trying to do these puzzles. And
yeah,
I'm not one of those people because I couldn't stand doing that. If I don't see, well, with achievements anyway, I can see why some people want to achieve those things, but more or less I don't really care, more or less. Though I don't mind getting achievements. But yeah, that's another aspect, is the idea of difficulty, getting achievements, goals, I guess personal goals in a sense as well. You want to, or, with, if we're talking about like, racing games or something like that, time limits and stuff like that, trying to do time trials or all this other stuff where you're trying to beat yourself every time. That's a whole nother aspect of sort of replayability. And I feel like the third one, I think it is probably the more obvious one. It's just you enjoyed the game or not. If you enjoyed it enough, you want to replay it. There's some games I personally had that where I'm like, I really enjoyed this game. Maybe most of the stuff is the same, but I just want to play it again.
It largely depends on the person, though, to be honest.
Oh yeah. Oh no, it definitely. All this stuff depends on the person in general. But I feel like in terms of like a statistical sort of standpoint, or sort of a generalization, with these ideas, these like three aspects, more content, difficulties, achievement, and enjoyability. I feel like they're sort of the scope of it, in a sense of what people would sort of deem as being replayable. Because enjoyability anyways, obviously the main appeal. You're going to play it because you enjoyed it. If it was just like a tree diagram, enjoyability I think would be at the top, where like content and difficulty be like stemming from it, because you would only play the game if you enjoyed it in the first place, right? You're not going to play. Well, I feel like people are just going to play the game to like do more content of it or do more challenging runs. But I don't know. I would only play the game if I enjoy it, right? There may be someone out there who's forcing themselves just to do it, to do those challenging runs. There probably is. I don't know. Actually, there probably is. Maybe the closest to someone like that is like esports people.
Yeah.
Not saying that they don't enjoy the game, but they have to, because it's a job. Not everyone's going to enjoy every aspect of their job, and that's sort of, I guess, the challenging part of this sort of replayability is sort of more important to them than the enjoyability of the game. They want to continually challenge themselves to get better at the game. However, I would assume most of the time that they do it because they at least enjoy it a little bit. And they're not going to do it if they don't enjoy it. I feel like that is the general thing around that. But who knows? There could be somebody out there who absolutely hates the game and just plays it for whatever reason, over and over again.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's very strange, but if someone does that, good on you. But those are sort of the main aspects, that I feel like I've come up with, or sort of had a look up. Sorry. Sort of these are the main things, the different types of games, the different aspects of games, I think are the most important parts of basically replaying a game in general. And, well, first up, anyway, a question for you, Alex.
Yeah.
I probably asked this last week, but I'll do it again. Would you play a game as much as possible? Well, actually, let's say it's a story-driven game first up. So then it sort of eliminates some other aspects of it. But yeah, let's say it's a story-driven game. Would you play the game as much as possible on the first run of it to complete the whole game as much as possible? Though there's obviously you can't complete the whole thing, but you're going to try your best to complete everything. Or do you leave it so that you can replay the game again and do those, like, for example, let's say you just do the main quest on your first run and you're like, let's play a second run. Now I'm going to do all the side quests as well. And blah, 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 on. This is more a general thing. I know, like, it depends on the game.
This is mainly just, like, a question related to, like, RPGs, though, I would say. It doesn't...
Well, yeah, I would say. Well, yeah, story games in general. It's because, well, more or less, anyway, these days, I feel like, anyway, that most of them have at least some decision aspect in it. Or at least have some aspect that allows you not to play the entire game first run. Because there's probably things you missed out. Or you might have missed some things out because you just missed it out. Not because of the game's fault, because of your fault, sometimes you miss things out accidentally. But what would you say? Would you say that you try and play a game fully the first time through? Or would you be like... would you sort of space it out and be like... Well, let's say like Fallout, for example, or Skyrim. I think Skyrim we could talk about in a second a lot about, but yeah, those are sort of aspects. Or even...
If it was Fallout, no. I would play it again from the start and then try and see other stuff. Because Fallout is a bit more... It's definitely more RPG-centric than Skyrim ever was. So, if you make like a good character, you can't side with X faction. So, yeah I would start again.
Uh-huh. And what about Skyrim then?
Oh man, Skyrim. My god. Skyrim's a different beast compared to most RPGs though, isn't it? It's just not an RPG. You can literally do everything in that game. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. You can... But I mean, there's a reason why, like... I like, this is a thing that we've talked about before, and I highly doubt anyone else has, been the same as us, but once you do, like, one good playthrough of Skyrim, I could never get back into it again.
I'm exactly the same.
I've tried. I've literally gotten past, like, the main quest, and I've done a couple quests, and I was just like, this is so boring, because the element that made Skyrim so appealing was the fact that there was something left to discover, in my opinion.
Yes.
It was more of a discovery game.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true, yeah. Because, when you first played it, it was like a very wow sort of thing when you played it, you're exploring all these sort of locations, these creatures, all these people and stuff like that.
And you still remember, like, all those little cool parts when, like, you were online and you just, like, you heard, like, a little whisper about, like, someone in the comments saying, oh, I heard you can join, like, fucking the Brotherhood. And it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, stuff like that, yeah. Well, like, I remember when I first played it, because at the time we didn't have, like, broadband, and all we had was dial-up. We had that mobile broadband stick, but, it was very limited. And what I would do is I would go on, I would use it, I would try and find some websites for, like, mining and stuff like that, where you can get all the different ores from, because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know, and I was like, because I was doing all the, the blacksmithing and stuff like that at the time. Yeah. And I was like, I sort of printed out these big, well, not big documents, but these pages of websites, which were, like, just telling me where all the ore places were, and certain, like, things how to do all these things and stuff like that. just remember doing that and, reading, sometimes comments and stuff like that. But yeah, like, when you first play Skyrim, it's a very wow game when you're playing it. It's an experience, it's really...
Yeah.
It's it also sort of opens up a lot of things also, like, how different it is to a lot of other games. Like, I played Oblivion before that, or a couple of years, actually, before that, and I don't even know if I finished it. Actually, I think I did finish it before, but I can't remember it, really. Oblivion was really good. I remember it being amazing, but now, anyway, I don't really remember much of it. But I used to remember anyway when Skyrim came out, people like used to talk shit, like they said, Skyrim was terrible, and they said Oblivion was better, and sort of, now more or less it's that obviously Skyrim's better and Oblivion's worse, but...
That's weird. I just remember all the hype around Skyrim when it came out. I remember there was so much hype, it was insane.
I remember a little bit of hype, but I just remember a lot of people anyway, I used to talk to, anyway, or at least see some things. I just remember, like, people just saying, Oblivion was better, or stuff like that. But that's the general sort of, thing that happens when a new sequel comes out. Everyone says the previous one was better until they actually play the new one. And that's sort of obviously how that works out.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's pretty obvious, but... I don't know, I remember it just being very strong at the time when people used to say Oblivion was better, even when Skyrim was out for a little bit, but that changed, I think, pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's
But
weird.
with Skyrim anyway, I feel like the other aspect is just how open it is. Yeah, you were saying before how open it is to sort of, like, characters in general. You could be a wizard battle mage who is also really good at sneaking, and who's basically a master crafter, master alchemist, all this, everything essentially. There's no real restrictions for you to do anything.
Yeah.
Which is obviously it's not really I feel it is probably a bit of a problem because it has restricted the replayability of the game, but it's also made it, anyway, that's sort of more appealing because, who doesn't want to be a wizard and a rogue, stuff like that. But that game was very
that's
loose.
A good point. It had
but the game is very loose.
Customization of
but I think that
literally be whatever you wanted.
But then that sort of, I feel like, led to its not downfall, but led to it not being as replayable as possible. Well, for me and you anyway.
Yes and no. I think it did come down to that, but I also think it also came down to combat cycles or the gameplay loop. The combat in that game was absolutely garbage, and I don't want to hear any other opinion that says it wasn't.
Yeah, no, I remember it not being too great. But yeah, with Skyrim anyway, that's sort of... It's interesting because, a lot of people still play it to this day, but a lot of people play it with mods and stuff, and I can't play with mods.
I haven't seen a lot of people talk about Skyrim these days, but...
not really, but people still... I feel like people still play it with mods.
I imagine that they would.
Like, I couldn't even really play it with mods. I don't know why, well, most of the time I had too many mods so it wouldn't work, and I was like, screw this, I don't want to fix this.
Yeah.
That's also the other part, but that, mods obviously adds another big replayability.
I mean,
we talk about like Crusader Kings too.
Oh yeah.
Sorry?
Well, I was just about to say it's kind of it definitely does have that fucking modability when you... I know, like, I pretty much 80% of my friends who have been unable to get their Skyrim working because they've installed too many mods.
Yeah, no, that's the same. I'm the same, and I just couldn't be bothered to fix it. I was like, screw this, I don't want to do this anymore. I downloaded all these mods, and they don't work. Yeah, like 90 or whatever, a ridiculous amount of mods that clearly shouldn't work altogether. But you're like, well, it should, but sadly, it does not.
So according to Steam, 14,000 players were playing Skyrim in the last 30 days. So people do still play it.
That's still pretty good, I think. And considering it did come out 8 years ago.
Yeah, and you could also talk about Skyrim Special Edition, which also has 19,000 players in the last 30 days.
Oh crap.
So.
But actually, another game that has had amazing replayability, and it's not story focused, GTA 5. That game's still to this day is played a lot.
Rockstar has pumped a lot of development time into that game, though.
Well, because they know how successful it is.
Yeah,
and
that's
because
true.
well, it doesn't matter. The other thing is, they've really succeeded at it. They made a like.
They made.
I can't remember.
Wasn't it like over $1 billion on the first day?
Was it? Well, I don't know. It was some ridiculous amount of
money.
And they're just like, they're on the wagon to just freaking milk the shit out of GTA. Go for it. People still play it. And yeah, I think the last time I probably played it. Yeah, I don't know. I think I've had enough of that game. I feel like I've had enough. I can't. Well, actually, no. This is a good point. Is I just can't play anymore because there's just too much stuff and it's too hard to get money. I think I just can't be bothered.
That's why I was banned.
Yeah, I know. Well, because we it doesn't.
Money cheats.
We use money cheats and mods and mod menus and stuff like that. I remember using that on PC and stuff, but I remember before that when I was on console.
It was such a grind. Yeah, I know.
It took me forever because I used to play a lot with a lot of people on GTA, and I'd have to spend days collecting money just so I could do all these, like, get the new vehicles, get all the new cars, get all the new apartments. I'd literally have to spend days trying to do, like, jobs, trying to do all this random stuff just to collect money. And it was the worst because I don't think the jobs in that game are really fun. I think they're really boring half the time. Most of them are just basically carbon copies of each other. But that's not the game anyway. The appeal isn't any of the jobs, even the heists. The heists were okay. I didn't mind them when the first time I played them. However, because I've done them probably a billion times, I don't really want to do them anymore.
The heists were fun originally, yeah.
Yes. However, I definitely think the most appealing part of the game was just free roam. For me anyway. And I remember just with you or like any of the other people I'd play with, we would find a million things to do in free roam that literally could just go on. We'd do like little car challenges. Yeah. I just remember we did like those Mini Cooper challenges. We used to do all those like cops and robbers stuff and all that stuff. That was fun. Like that was golden times. But but that's sort of that. It's interesting to see that.
It wraps around to the main point when you say that to do those, you needed the money.
You need the fucking money. That's why I could never play it anymore because I was like, well, I can't be bothered to do this anymore. I could do mods and do money hacks and stuff like that, but people just get constantly banned for it and, just to play the fucking game. And that's another argument in itself that I don't see why there's a problem with people using mods anymore because what's it going to change? People are just going to, if anything, they're going to play the game more. People aren't using mods to buy the game. They're using the mods in the game to, do the things. But, you obviously don't get really money. Oh, I'm assuming, obviously you don't get money because someone's going to play 300 hours of it or more. You're obviously only going to get money when the first time they buy it. So, if anything, I think they should have let mods go. Then that would draw more people in. So then more people could play. Then they could get even more money. But, who knows? There's probably all marketing and whatever, but that's just my idea behind it. Because honestly, if mods in that were fine, they had no bans, I would probably still... Actually, I probably won't still be playing it, but I'll be playing it a lot longer than I did, which I think the last time I played it was 2016 or 2015, probably like that. Which is now anyways, a long time ago in GTA because, well... There's all these different DLCs like lasers and aliens and whatever, doomsday, bunkers and whatever, flying bikes and all this random stuff that is not GTA anymore, but whatever. More power to them. Continue to do that, but you could have had more players. If you just let the mods flow. Or anyway, for me, when it comes to replaying games anyway, for me, I'm a person who will usually play it as much as possible. I think this is more specific to RPGs, but it would also be specific to just linear games and stuff like that. But I would most of the time play it as much as possible on the first run. However, I also know that I cannot actually do everything in the game. For example, I'm actually playing a game right now called Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire, and there's a lot of decision making in that game that could literally make you play that game endlessly because of how many decisions there are. There's so many different branching paths. There's a lot of idea of, a lot of dialogue and stuff like that. And dialogue is affected by class, about specific, like your reputation, certain people certain things you've done, and all this stuff. There's so many things you could replay with a game, but I'm a person who will just play it first time as much as possible on my first time, do as much as I can, do all the side quests, do all the DLCs, do everything, and then, finish the game. However, knowing that I at least know there's a lot more I could have done because I missed out because, well, my character is a different class, or my reputation with certain factions wasn't as good, so I missed out on some quest, or some companions. Like, companions is a very big thing of that game. But I also have that, that thing is like, maybe one day, however, I don't know when this one day will come, is I may replay these games. However, I don't know if that's ever going to be possible. Who knows? But, lastly, to finish that off, I think another important aspect of replayability is the idea of time. Anyway, I don't really play as much as I would used to anymore. Like playing every day, like for however fucking long. Nowadays, anyway, I'd probably only play during like the uni break. That's it. More or less because, well, I want to focus on other things. But I think that's another really big aspect to it. And that's sort of, for me anyway, with like Pillars of Eternity, that's another aspect of why I want to do as much as possible in the first run, because I know that I probably won't have another time to play this, because, one, Alex will know this, I have too many games to actually play, so I kind of want to finish, this one game so I can go on to the next, because I have a billion other games I want to play. That's also another aspect of replayability, because you want to play other games. But yeah, I think actually there's two other aspects of it we could add to it. So there's obviously the three main ones, which is it how much content is in the game, the difficulty, the achievements in the game, the overall enjoyability of the game, the fun that you get out of it, the time it takes to actually play the game, and time that affects sort of how much you want to get out of the game. And lastly is the idea of just, there's a lot of other games out there at the same time that probably appeal to you, depending on, there's a whole nother thing, is the sense of how you're feeling at the time. You may just want to play a completely different game, then you'll forget that replayability of that first game you'll play in the first place. Then, it just goes on this, I guess, like this unending loop of you just starting a game, then halfway through it you just play a new game, and then just forget about it, and then there's this chain of unfinished games. But I guess, there's a lot in terms of replayability, but I feel like, it's an interesting thing to think about anyway, with games having replay value, and how sort of, well, it affects anyway people, and in the way that, well, me and Alex anyway, how we would go about playing replayability. But yeah, I think anyway, yeah, the main important things anyway now is the idea of time and the idea of just playing other games. And I feel like that's the sad part of it, is because, well, you'd want to play more of these games, but there's a lot more, and there's just more coming. That they either need to slow down, or just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It's just, there's just too many. There's literally so many. And because of how busy everyone is, you can't play everything. But it's the sad reality of it all. There's too much. There's just too much. Which is a shame, because everyone wants to do these things, but sadly, life isn't fair, and it doesn't want you to do all those things. That is a shame. Is there anything you want to add to that, Alex? Anything of your own experience?
No, not really. I can't really think of anything else to add, to be honest. I think I pretty much did everything I wanted to.
I'll quickly add this, talk about this now anyway. So I'm going to get more time on this, but it's alright. However, I was thinking anyway, this is more of a brainstorming session, and if anyone's actually even listening, maybe you could say something, but for Alex anyway, I was thinking we could probably even add a new section to this, like, podcast, we've talked about this before. There's some aspects, some different things I'm thinking about at the moment anyway, and we've talked about this before. So there's, I just wrote it down, story time is the idea of either me or you writing something and then reading it here or whatever, like a story or something in general, or reading one off the internet. So like, there's those, just any sort of story in general, just sort of like a little short story narrative that comes across, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Something a little bit different to sort of just conversations and stuff like that, instead of a very formatted a narrative. But of course, that's still brainstormy. Other things, we've done a little bit of this before, like quizzes. Maybe like we could branch out and just do random quizzes, just find super random quizzes and just do like random quizzes each week, or each bi-weekly thing, which would be, interesting to see, either it helps us or it's just like a goof, and it's just like, just something really stupid, but there's some stuff like that, and there's a whole lot of other things, there could be like, even just like facts, talking about maybe something interesting in general, maybe even short reviews, like quickfire reviews of things, or quickfire facts. But more or less, there's some ideas, and if anyone else has got any ideas, I will more than happily like to take them on board and have a geezer at them. But I believe that is it for the free flow section, and I believe we'll head over to the review. Alright, Alex. So, Total War Warhammer.
Yeah.
Came out in 2016.
Wow.
I believe at the end of 2016. Actually, I don't know, maybe it didn't. And then I think Total War Warhammer 2 only came out a year later. I think, 2017, I believe. First up, what's your general review on Total War Warhammer with rating?
I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10.
Alright. What's your general...
I hate giving things reviews though, because it's like, fucking hell.
Yeah, well, too bad you're here.
Yeah, I know. My general review was very fun. It's my first Total War game that I've ever replayed, despite the fact that I own like fucking almost the whole collection of Total War games that I've just picked up through sales and game packs just throughout the years. And it's the first... Well, it's not the first time I've ever had I've ever messed with the Warhammer universe. I used to own Warhammer 40k figures, but I only use them in like my own imaginary battles, and I never played the game properly. And
yeah, no, that's what I think. Well, that's sort of the idea of, well, it costs too fucking much, so you just fuck around with the ones you've got.
Yeah. So, but it was fun. I've always thought the Warhammer universe was pretty weird.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. It's probably one of the weirdest.
I've always considered myself someone who is very... I kind of like logically based like universes and... Like,
you don't think rat people are logical?
Well, that's the thing. I think that even though it's not logical, it's cool. I'm not going to say that it's not cool, because it is cool. But I would say, like, I've never really considered myself someone who's really big. I've always never considered myself someone who's big into fantasy universes. I've always been far more into like stuff like alternative history, or just like games that are set in the normal universe, I guess. I
don't like the normal universe.
But like, it's definitely a thing that's grown on me, I would say. And I think it's really cool now that I've played a bit of it and understand the lore behind it now. And I think that the way the battles work is definitely like, honestly, Total War. It's a great system of how it simulates battles, and I love the control you have over it. Although I think that it's probably not as I don't think it's probably as in depth as some. Like I don't think it's as in depth as it probably should be, as in like, rather than like. But I think that's mostly limited to computer graphics and computer CPUs that we have today. So a unit would have, like, a morale as a group of people rather than each individual person in that unit having morale, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I think that for what it's trying to simulate, it does it very well.
So this is... God, I don't know what number Total War this is. I played a number of them. I think the first one... Was it Rome or Medieval? Whichever came first. I played that...
came first. Yeah. Because I own Medieval, but I don't have Rome.
Oh yeah, no, Rome Total War came out in 2014, 2004, and Medieval 2 Total War came out in 2016. So, yeah,
Medieval 2. I thought you were talking about Medieval.
No, yeah, Medieval 2, sorry. Because was there one? I don't know if there was a one. Oh, there was. That came out in 2002. Yeah, it came out in 2002. No, I don't think I played the first one. I did play the second one, though. I played most of the... I played Rome, Rome 2, Attila, Shogun, Napoleon, Empire, and all the Warhammer ones. I played a lot of these games, and they're really fun. However, I definitely think Warhammer tops it off because, well, it's freaking completely different to the others, really, because it's an entirely different universe.
I think it really goes well with the Warhammer as well, considering...
It does. Total War and Warhammer in general, I think, are the perfect fit. They both work hand in hand, especially because of, well, anyway, the old Games Workshop Warhammer Fantasy, because now it's Warhammer Age of Sigmar, which, you know, no one really knows what the fuck that's about. But Total War, Warhammer Fantasy, the original anyway, I definitely think it plays well into the Total War mechanics, and just the Games Workshop mechanics in general, because, you know, the idea of creating large armies, you know, forming, you know, spear balls and infantry and stuff like that, it all works really well together. But I think, Warhammer, I think, is probably the best one I've ever played of all of them because, well, it's just so much freaking different to the others because you get to use giant monsters, there's all these different cool mechanics. It's not to go against those others, but, you know, I enjoyed those ones, the older ones and stuff like that, but, you know, kind of got boring when it was just, you know, kind of the same shit all over again.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, there's a good review on Total War Warhammer that says, it says here, I played the previous Total War games, but there's only so many different types of pikemen, swordsmen, and bowmen you can use.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. They're literally all the fucking same. They're all just basically reskins. But here, there's fucking a massive difference between, like, each faction you play. Either if you've got shitty spearmen who are literally skeletons, who basically get one shot, and the best word for it anyway is chod. The chod the front line anyway, or your, you know, high tier fucking poleman or halberdiers, sorry, from like the Empire and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely I'll say Total War Warhammer I think is the best Warhammer there's been. Total War there has been. It has definitely stuck like the most for me. It has definitely been very appealing to me, and I've very much enjoyed a lot of it. And it's because, you know, it works just really well. The universe, you know, the universe anyway, if no one knows what Warhammer is anyway, it's basically, I'd sort of pick this up, it's basically a fantasy setting loosely based on the Renaissance sort of Europe, but a very dark take on it. And it's sort of very magic-y, sort of very, it's almost wacky in a sense of how much random shit there is. You know, there's Vikings, there's rat people, there's dinosaurs, there's dark elves, you know, edgy elves, there's all this other stuff, orcs, vampires, tree men, you know, there's so much stuff. Chaos, God, chaos, can't forget about chaos, and it all works well. I definitely think, well, in terms of the game mechanics anyway, the most appealing part of it is just because of how different every faction is. So, for example, let's say, because there's the main factions, but this is sort of going on with all the new free DLCs and all the normal DLCs anyway, is, you know, there's the different factions. There's for the greenskins, they have this thing called the fightiness mechanic, which essentially makes them, if they fight enough, they get to spawn another whole army, which is like ridiculous. You got the Bretonians with their chivalry and their peasants, who focus on a lot of gold and focus on a lot of specialized units. And you got the dwarves, the dwarves are very hardy, and their Book of Grudges they've got, which is, a very classic dwarven thing anyway. But it definitely adds a very unique playstyle to each faction you play. You're either playing a very aggressive or defensive or resourceful or very isolationist, with, wood elves and stuff like that. You're playing, obviously, to your strengths of your faction, but that's the other great part of this game, is just the way that you play your faction is also very important. Do you play to your faction strengths, or do you play to your opponent's weaknesses? And that's a very big part in this game, because, well, without generalizing everything, most armies have a very similar format in terms of what units they can field. So there's at least missile infantry, there's some chod, which are your frontline people. Sometimes, most of the time, they have artillery, or they have some fast units. They're very basic unit types. However, they're all very different in the way they all mechanically work anyway. But when you're playing in these factions, you're either working with your own strengths. So let's say you're playing as Bretonia. You focus on your cavalry, because your cavalry is the best thing. Your peasants are absolute fucking garbage. You basically just put them in there, so then they hold the line for your cav. Or you get greenskins, the line of chod. You got your greenskins, which is literally just to overwhelm and just fucking beat them with brute force. You got the beastmen, the best men, with their very aggressive nature, which essentially I like to think of them, they're just the ones who fuck up everyone else, and just basically leave everyone in the worst state possible as they lay waste to towns and armies. And then there's the vampires, which is a whole nother mechanic, is the idea of fear and terror. Is the idea of you don't have to beat them with super epic warriors and fucking, all this cool units. You just have to beat them with spooky skeletons and, giant flying bats. And that stuff, that adds a very interesting thing. And going into the replayability, with all these factions basically having their own unique playstyles, it definitely brings you back to want to play it, because, well, it ticks off all these things. There's more content. As we said, each faction has their own unique playstyle, even though they're very similar in the sense of, well, they're all factions where they're very, the basic unit types, but they all have their own unique playstyles. Some of them, their units are very low leadership, but you've got very specialized units that can't make up for that. Or you've got units who are very good at range, but very bad at melee. You got very good at cav. You got very good monsters for the greenskins. Oh, actually not really the greenskins, but for the lizardmen. But that's Total War Warhammer 2. But there's a lot of content. It's very enjoyable. I would say timing anyway. To play a game anyway. I don't feel like it goes very long compared to many games, in all honesty. However, it does go very long depending how long you play for it. But there's I think this game definitely ticks off most of the boxes of replayability, and for me anyway, it has made me play a number of times. I think I've probably played at least every faction at least once, and played them to their fullest. It's definitely overall the game is great with it. The game mechanics is great. It's visually great. I think it's very good, even for came out in 2016. It still looks very good. The monsters look amazing. The terrain itself, when you're playing the grand map campaign sort of thing, the terrain looks very nice. And there's the various gameplay mechanics, both when you're playing with the armies and when you're playing in the grand strategy map, where you got attrition, you got to deal with sneaky boys and ambushes, stuff like that. And, there's tons and tons of things with it. Though, I guess, well, anyway, actually, another good point of it anyway is, well, this is I feel like this has got to do with any Total War Warhammer game, but it's just the idea of tactics and strategy in general in the game is what also draws you into it, because you want to use these armies in specific ways. Depending how you play Total War, most of the time people who play Total War will want to play it because they want to do these cool strategies, or they want to use these units to what they're actually meant to do. They don't just want to sit back in a corner and just fucking win because you're cheesing it by sitting in the back corner. usually would play Total War because you want to use, these cool units, use their, again, the faction's strengths, or you want to play to your enemy's weaknesses. It's a very, it's a great part of Total War that has definitely lived throughout all the Total War games, and this game especially, I think it is definitely shined the most, because it essentially, because of how different each faction is, it definitely brings in that idea, well, if these factions are very different, you have to basically bring in a different playstyle for most of them. Because, you can't, sadly, with, let's say, like the Bretonia, you won't be able to field armies as big as, like, the Goblin Horde or some shit like that, You'll have to think, you have to use your cavalry in that matter, and you got to use instead of brute force with your melee, you have to count on your cavalry to do all that damage. And there's all these, there's unique tech trees for each to research, a lot of buildings, very cool buildings on the grand strategy map, and all the very different aspects of sort of maintaining an empire in general. You need to keep public order, happiness in general, as good, like the taint, with chaos, chaos sort of ruins your lands. If it gets too high, then your public order gets too low, and then people start getting mad, then rebels spawn and shit like that. There's diplomacy and stuff like that. However, I feel like, anyway, for me, the two drawbacks of this game anyway, and I feel like for any Total War game, diplomacy, I just haven't really been a fan of. I think it's very simple, and I understand why it's very simple. It doesn't need to be, too fucking extreme. However, I don't really like it. I feel like it doesn't work half the time because, well, the AI is sometimes stupid, so like it doesn't make any sense. You're fighting like a war against chaos, and they're like, fuck you, we want to fight you instead of chaos, and it's all this stupid stuff, and it doesn't really make sense all the time, especially with diplomacy and the way it sort of works, where you gotta give money and all this. It's very simple, I will give it that, and it definitely gets the point across. However, I feel like it could be a bit more in depth. There could be a lot more to it that could definitely add a bit more to the game, a bit more lifestyle to it. However, I will say, in Total War Warhammer 2 anyway, I feel like it remedies this a little bit without going too much in depth into it. But the High Elves, they have a very unique diplomacy screen where basically they get to become friends with everyone by doing these quests and these like their own their own gameplay mechanic. And I feel like that's a really good mechanic, because it basically makes it so you can become friends with everyone. But I definitely think it should be a bit more widely used throughout, like every other faction should be able to do that, because it just adds a bit more fun to the diplomacy. And the other part I feel like is, I will say, because there's Total War Warhammer 1 and there is number 2, I feel like most of the time the things I'm going to talk about now have been remedied a little bit in number 2. The magic system in number 1 anyway.
It's kind of one-dimensional.
It's kind of, well, yeah, it's not very flashy or anything. Well, no, it is flashy, sorry, but it's not very impactful. I like to think of it as cheap particle effects that, do a bit of a dazzle there and sort of do a bit of explosions. But if anything, they don't really do, they either just, I feel like they don't do enough damage at all to impact. They don't do enough sort of, they don't have much impact in the game. And the best way I bet I can sort of compare this to is, you would have much more success if you micromanage some other unit than trying to do magic. For example, you could just micromanage a cavalry unit. You'd probably do a fuck ton more than doing magic. And that's, I think that's definitely a drawback for the first game. But I definitely think the second game, definitely because the second game made the particle effects a lot more cooler. But I definitely think they did a little bit better with them. However, I still think, in all honesty, the magic system isn't great. But look, that it's because it's a whole different mechanic that they've had to introduce just for Warhammer. And it's probably going to still take a while. Hopefully, Warhammer 3 they'll fix that. But that is definitely a drawback for me, is the magic system and then diplomacy. The last thing also I want to talk about anyway is, this goes on with Crusader Kings 2 anyway, is the other appealing factor of the game is that with Total War, it's the idea of the story also that draws me in, because when you're playing it as each faction, because they're all unique and they have their own playstyles, you create sort of, even though these characters, they're pre-generated and stuff like that. But when you're playing as them, you're playing, you're sort of reacting to the rest of the world, or you're actively doing things to the world, but you're sort of, you're creating a story for yourself. So for example, if you're playing as the dwarves, most of the time you're just going to be up in your mountains, keeping this sort of stronghold, bunkering down. Or you're as Bretonia, who are crusading across the world, killing vampires and all this other shit. And then there's the Beastmen, who literally just screw up the rest of the world, because that's all they do for fun. But it definitely, I think it adds a very nice personality to the game that, you could play one time as the dwarves who are hunkering down, and then another time you could be like, well, the dwarves have had enough in the mountains. It's time to fucking go out there and kill everyone. I've done that before, and it's very fun, because, well, dwarves are very slow, but, when you kick asses, these, like, strong. Yeah, they're very strong, and once they, like, get moving, once their war machine essentially gets kicked off, it's fucking, like, basically impossible to stop. It's also with the orcs, you could play as a very aggressive orc faction, obviously that's what they play to, the advantage, but you could literally just play as some orcs who just, sit back and, well, it'd be really bad, but, you know what I mean, there's a lot of story to it, and with the quest, with the various quests, the various magic items, the various people you can interact with, it just adds a whole sort of another layer to it, adds another replayability aspect to the game, more content to play, in general. But yeah, overall, anyway, yeah, Total War Warhammer is definitely, it's done a very good job, and with Warhammer 2 anyway, it's just improved on it. It's definitely added a lot more, fixed up some errors that I definitely fixed up some things that I feel like, definitely did need fixing up. And obviously, because it's been out for 3 years now, it's had plenty of DLCs, free LCs, and new factions, new stories, new people, and everything. It's definitely added a whole lot more to the game, and it's definitely done a lot more. For me, I would probably say out of 10, because I felt like diplomacy was a bit too simple. It definitely deducted that a bit for me, and the magic system was more or less just some cool fireworks and particle effects. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10 as well. But I would, if we're doing Warhammer 2, I'd probably boost it up to like even a 9 or a 10, because it basically fixes most of those things for me that, well, most of the time anyway. But yeah, I'd say probably an 8 out of 10. And, it's definitely done a very, very good job. And it's definitely proven that, well, Warhammer just fits the Total War universe. It definitely does a very good job of all that. Is there anything you want to add? Any last additions for the review, Alex? Anything?
I will just say that it's made me interested in the Warhammer universe.
Yes,
which I never really originally was.
Yeah.
Although I did have to learn the difference between Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Fantasy.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's. But even then, when it's the difference between Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Fantasy in general, it's a bit. No one really knows if they're the same, or just in different time periods or whatever. But yeah, when I played this game, I didn't really have very much Warhammer Fantasy knowledge. I had a bit from Games Workshop, and I didn't even know much of that. But definitely, this game has opened me up to the Warhammer universe, and the Warhammer universe is very, very grim, very, very bad place to be. But it's a very interesting thing, and who knows? Maybe we even talk about it one day. I think it'd be a very interesting thing to talk about. Because the Warhammer universe is fucking massive. There's so much stuff in there, and there's just a ton of stuff in there. A lot of things. There's the all the Chaos Gods, talking about all them, or there's all these other factions that aren't even in the game. I think there's like an ogre faction, if I'm not mistaken. There's all this other random stuff. Vermintide. There's the game Warhammer Vermintide that more or less sort of fits in. But yeah, no, yes. Warhammer in general, the fantasy universe is a very interesting one, and who knows, maybe one day, that would be cool. I'd love to see like a movie or a TV show on that. I think that'd be pretty cool. I think it'd be very different to a lot of any other TV shows, because, it's also like the time period isn't really one that's very, time period it's based off anyway, the Renaissance isn't very noticeable anywhere in today's media, but who knows, maybe someday someone will make it, and if they do, great, and don't make it shit. But overall, Total War Warhammer, great game, loving it, 8 out of 10, played it for however freaking long, but we'll move over to the final section. Alright, Alex, obviously, yet again, I always assume that maybe we could finish this earlier, but, alas, that does not happen. Over time. But nevertheless, it has been a very enjoyable podcast, as usual, and I thank you for joining me in this podcast.
Yes.
Final things to talk about, not much. So, the format, we talked a little bit about that. It may change. Maybe not the next podcast, but maybe the one after. However, I'm going to sort of have a look into maybe anything, that's different, something that's unique, and something that we enjoy anyway. Because again, this podcast is more or less just for me and Alex, and people just to talk about whatever the fuck we want. But yeah, next podcast anyway, I'm hoping I'll be able to. I was kind of meant to do it for this podcast, but I kind of didn't really have the time and finish it. And there's a book I'm currently reading. And I really want to finish that for next podcast. It recently came out. It's called, what's it called? It's called Shadow of the Conqueror.
Oh.
No, it's not Bodega. Not Pyrian Flax's book. No, it's Shadow of the Conqueror by Shad M. Brooks. So far it's been very interesting. But hopefully that book will be reviewed next episode and you can look forward to that. Hopefully we'll also try and get a guest on and we'll see how that all goes. But I believe... Unless you've got anything else to say, Alex?
No, I'm good.
Alright, well, I believe that is the end of the podcast. And I will catch you all next time. As per usual, Alex. See you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.